My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I found out my wedding venue had been canceled from a woman named Priya at Hollow Oak Manor, who called to confirm the change of client name on file for the June 14th reservation. I remember standing in my kitchen with a wooden spoon in my hand, tomato sauce still bubbling behind me, asking her to repeat that. "The reservation under Emily Carter," she said. "It's been transferred. We show the new primary contact as Claire Whitfield." Claire, my sister. I asked Priya very calmly, how a reservation gets transferred without the person who paid the deposit signing anything. She went quiet for a second, then said the request had come through with what she believed was my authorization, an email, sent from an address that looked like mine, giving permission to release the date to my immediate family member for her wedding instead. I hadn't sent that email. I put the spoon down. I turned off the stove, and I sat at my kitchen table for 11 minutes without moving, just staring at my phone, thinking about the deposit check my fiancé Daniel and I had written 8 months ago, the one with both our names on it, the one that was supposed to buy us a Saturday in June that now apparently belonged to my sister. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, what time is it for you right now? Where are you watching from? I'm curious how far this story will travel, because what I did after that phone call is the part nobody in my family saw coming. Not because I screamed, not because I showed up and flipped a table, but because I decided, sitting at that table with cold tomato sauce congealing on the stove, that I was done being the version of myself who explained her feelings to people who'd already made up their minds. To understand why this happened, you need to understand my family, and you need to understand that this wasn't the first time. My mother Diane has a talent for making theft sound like tradition. She doesn't take things from you. She redistributes them, always in the name of fairness, always with a sigh that implies you're being difficult for noticing. My father, Robert, isn't cruel. He's just permanently, professionally absent from every decision that might require him to disagree with his wife. He nods. He changes the subject. He has been changing the subject for 30 years. And then there's Claire. My younger sister, 26, engaged to a man named Tyler, who worships her the way you'd worship someone you haven't been disappointed by yet. Claire is charming in the specific way that makes people forget to ask follow-up questions. She has never had to ask twice for anything in her life, because our mother asks for her first. This wasn't the first time Claire had absorbed something of mine and called it generosity on my part. When I was 17, Claire wanted to go to a music festival with friends. I had already bought a ticket for myself, using babysitting money I'd saved for 4 months. 2 days before the festival, my mother informed me that Claire needed my ticket more than I did, because Claire's friend group was going, and mine had fallen through. A fact my mother invented on the spot. I gave Claire the ticket. I stayed home. When I turned 22, I saved for a solo trip to Portugal, my first time leaving the country alone. 3 weeks before I left, my mother called to tell me Claire was struggling and needed a companion for a trip of her own, and wouldn't it be a nice sister thing for me to bring her along to Portugal instead of going alone like I'd planned? I said no for once. My mother didn't speak to me for 11 days. 2 years ago, when our grandmother was in hospice, I took 4 weeks of unpaid leave to sit with her every afternoon, feed her, read to her, hold her hand at 2 a.m. when she was scared. Claire visited twice, and at the funeral, my mother stood up and thanked the girls collectively for their devotion, never once naming which girl had actually been there. And 6 months before my venue disappeared, when Claire and Tyler got engaged, my mother threw them an engagement party at our parents' house and used, without asking, the $400 of decor and dishware I had already purchased for my own bridal shower, items I'd stored in their garage for safekeeping. When I mentioned it, my mother said, "Emily, it's just stuff. You'll get new stuff." I should have known "you'll get new stuff" would eventually apply to my wedding date. The day the venue called, my phone did not stop buzzing. My mother first. "Don't be dramatic about this. Claire's guest list is bigger than yours." It made more sense. Then Claire. "I didn't think you'd actually be upset. It's not like you and Daniel even picked out the decor yet." Then my mother again. 20 minutes later. "You're really going to ruin your sister's engagement over a building." Then my father, one single text, 40 minutes after everyone else. Let's not fight about this. Then Claire, softer this time, almost sweet. I really think once you calm down, you'll see this is actually kind of an honor. Mom said you'd understand. Not one of them asked if I was okay. I called my best friend Maya that night. Maya has known me since we were 9, has sat through every version of this story with a different label on it, and has never once told me I was overreacting. We met at the diner near her apartment, the one with the booth that always wobbles no matter how many napkins you fold under the leg. I told her everything, the phone call, the fake email, the texts. She let me finish before she said anything. Then she put her coffee down and said, "Emily, this isn't help anymore. This is ownership. Your family doesn't share things with you. They take things from you and then explain to you why you should be grateful they let you keep any of it at all." I didn't say anything for a while. I just sat there letting that sentence rearrange something in my chest. "You gave Claire that festival ticket," Maya said. "You gave her Portugal, sort of, by giving up the trip alone. You gave her your grandmother's funeral spotlight without even trying to. And now she's got your wedding venue, and your mother forged an email to make it look like you handed it over willingly. Do you understand what that means? It means somewhere along the way, they stopped asking, because you kept saying yes, even when you didn't say it out loud. So what do I do?" Maya looked at me for a long moment. "You stop performing reasonable. You start documenting unreasonable." I decided to try it their way first. Reasonable. One more time. I drove to my parents' house on a Sunday, the day they do their weekly dinner, still holding on to some naive hope that if I explained it calmly, my mother would hear herself. Claire was already there when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. My mother was at the stove. My father was in his recliner in the next room, visible through the doorway, very interested in a golf broadcast that wasn't even live. "I just want to understand," I said, keeping my voice level. "How does a venue get transferred without my signature?" My mother didn't turn around from the stove. "Emily, it's one weekend. You can find another Saturday. That's not what I asked. You're always so intense about logistics," she said, still stirring. "It's exhausting, honestly." Claire finally looked up. "You're really going to make this a whole thing? I already told my bridesmaids the date." "I told my bridesmaids the date 8 months ago," I said. "Because it was my date. I paid the deposit." "Dad helped with some of it too," Claire said quickly, glancing toward the living room. "Right, Dad?" My father, from his chair, without turning around. "Let's not do the money thing right now." "There is no money thing," I said. "There's a fact. I paid a deposit for a venue. Someone impersonated me in an email to get it released to Claire. That's not a family disagreement. That's fraud." My mother finally turned around, and her face did the thing it always does when she's about to reframe reality. A soft, wounded expression, like I'm the one attacking her. "Don't use words like that in my kitchen. We are a family. Families share. Families ask," I said. "You didn't ask. I raised 2 daughters, and I have spent my whole life trying to be fair to both of you," she said, voice rising now. "And this ingratitude, is what I get. You've always had to have everything be about you, Emily. Even your grandmother's funeral, you had to make into some kind of martyrdom performance." That one landed exactly where she meant it to. I felt my throat tighten. "I sat with her for 4 weeks," I said quietly. "And you've never let anyone forget it," my mother snapped. "Claire has her own way of showing love. Not everyone has to perform devotion the way you do." "I'm not performing anything. I was there." "You always make things so hard," Claire said, arms crossed now. "It's just a building, Em. God." "It's not the building," I said. "It's that you two didn't even think you needed to ask me." "Because we knew you'd say no," my mother said, and then immediately looked like she wished she hadn't. There it was, out loud finally. They hadn't asked, because they already knew the answer, so they skipped the part where I got to have one. "So instead you forged an email," I said. "Nobody forged anything," my mother said too fast. "I simply I may have clarified some details with the venue on your behalf, as your mother, because you weren't picking up your phone that week. You emailed them pretending to be me. I was helping. My phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. I nearly let it go to voicemail out of pure instinct to stay in the fight, but the screen said Hollow Oak Manor, and something in me knew this call mattered more than winning the argument in the kitchen. I stepped into the hallway. This is Emily. It was Priya again, the events coordinator, and her voice had a different tone this time, careful, almost apologetic in a professional way. Miss Carter, I wanted to follow up personally. After your call the other day, our office manager flagged the email that authorized the transfer for a closer look. The sending address used a lookalike domain, not your actual email provider. It's a common scam pattern we've started seeing more of, unfortunately, people impersonating clients to alter bookings. Given that, and given that only your name and Daniel's name are on the original signed contract and deposit, we're required to treat this as a fraudulent modification. I wanted to let you know we're documenting it on our end, and legally, the original reservation stands under your name unless you tell us otherwise. I stood in that hallway, phone against my ear, and for the first time in days I felt something other than grief. I felt ground under my feet. Thank you, I said. I'd like copies of everything you have, the original contract, the fraudulent email, and any correspondence with my sister or mother about the transfer. Of course. I'll have our office send a full file to you this afternoon. I walked back into the kitchen. My mother was watching me with an expression that hadn't decided yet whether to be defensive or defiant. That was the venue, I said. They're calling it fraud, officially, in writing. The kitchen went very quiet. Even my father's golf broadcast seemed to hush itself. For the next several days, I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't post anything. I didn't call to yell. I did something quieter, and in some ways scarier to people who are used to me being predictable. I started collecting. I saved every text. I screenshotted the group chat. Timestamps intact. I forwarded Priya's email to my own personal archive and to Daniel, and asked her to send the fraudulent email specifically, the one with the lookalike domain, so I'd have it in writing, word for word. I wrote down the exact date and time of the phone call where my mother said, on the record in my memory but soon in writing too, we knew you'd say no. I wasn't building a case to destroy my family. I was building a record because I had spent 29 years being told my memory of events was the unreasonable version, and I was done letting that happen without proof. Comment what you would have done, because this question haunted me while I sat at my laptop at 11 at night, organizing screenshots into folders labeled by date, because some part of me still wondered if I was the dramatic one, if maybe I really was making a building into a bigger deal than it was. But every time I reread that sentence, we knew you'd say no, I remembered it wasn't about a building at all. Priya called again 11 days after the first call, and this time she asked if I'd be willing to come in for a meeting with the venue's general manager, a man named Frank Devlin, because, in her words, given the fraud concern, we'd like everyone involved to be present, so there's no confusion going forward about who the contract belongs to. I said yes. I asked if Daniel could come. I asked deliberately if my mother and sister could be invited too, because I wanted this conversation to happen with a neutral party in the room, not across a kitchen island where my father could hide behind a golf broadcast. They agreed to come. I think my mother assumed she could charm her way through it the way she charms her way through everything. We sat in Hollow Oak Manor's small event office the following Thursday, Daniel and me on one side of a round table, my mother and Claire on the other, Frank Devlin at the head with a folder in front of him, and Priya beside him taking notes. I want to start, Frank said, by clarifying the facts as we understand them, so everyone's working from the same information. He laid it out plainly. The original contract and deposit were under Emily Carter and Daniel Reyes. An email purporting to be from Emily Carter, sent from a domain that was not Emily Carter's actual email provider, requested the date be released to a new client, Claire Whitfield. The venue's fraud detection review flagged inconsistencies. As of today, the original contract stood. I can explain the email, my mother said quickly. I set it up because Emily was overwhelmed with work that week and asked me to just handle the venue communication. I never asked you that, I said. You said, and I quote, "Mom, can you deal with the venue stuff? I'm swamped." I said that about confirming our catering headcount in March, I said. Not about transferring the entire reservation to Claire in June. My mother's mouth opened and closed. Frank glanced down at his folder. The email in question was sent on May 2nd. Ms. Carter, do you recall a conversation with your mother about venue logistics around that date? No, I said. I was in Chicago for work that week. I have the trip confirmation if you need it. Claire jumped in. Okay, but even if the wording was off, the intention was good. Mom just wanted to help me since my date fell through with my original venue. What venue was that? Frank asked. Claire hesitated. The Wilshire Room. And why did that fall through? Another pause. We didn't actually book it yet. We were still deciding. I watched my mother's jaw tighten. This was the first contradiction. Small but real. Claire's venue fell through story didn't hold up under one simple question. So there was no venue to lose, Frank said, writing something down. Just a preference to use this one instead of finding your own. It's a family thing, my mother said, her voice climbing. You're making this sound so cold and legal. We're talking about my daughters. With respect, ma'am, Frank said, not unkindly. You emailed my company impersonating a paying client to reassign a signed contract. That's not a family thing on our end. That's a legal one. My mother's face went pale, then quickly rearranged itself into something wounded again, the same expression from her kitchen. I would never do anything to hurt either of my girls. I took a breath and pulled out my phone. I have the text where you said you knew I'd say no if you asked. I have the text from the day this happened, where nobody asked if I was okay. I have the receipt for the original deposit, both our names on it. I'd like all of that in the file, along with today's conversation. Frank nodded slowly. We'll document today's meeting and attach it to the case file. For now, the reservation remains under Emily and Daniel's name. If your family wishes to book a separate date for Claire's wedding, we're happy to discuss availability, under a properly signed contract, with a legitimate deposit from the actual client. We left that meeting without a full resolution. Claire and Tyler still didn't have a wedding date, my mother still hadn't admitted to anything beyond helping, and the air between all of us was colder than it had been in years. But something had shifted. For the first time, the story wasn't just my mother's version anymore. It was on paper. My mother tried to control the story before I could tell it myself. Within 2 days, the family group chat, the big one, aunts, cousins, family friends, had a new post from her, a long paragraph about how some people in this family have forgotten what generosity looks like, and how she was praying for softer hearts this wedding season. No names. She didn't need names. Everyone knew. Claire posted a photo of herself and Tyler looking wistfully at a different venue, captioned, "Sometimes plans change, and that's okay. Grateful for a fresh start." I didn't respond in the group chat. I posted one thing, on my own page, not tagged to anyone, a screenshot of the original signed venue contract. Daniel's and my names clearly visible, dated 10 months earlier, next to a screenshot of the fraudulent transfer email, with the look-alike domain circled in red, and a caption that said only, "Just for the record." For 11 minutes, nobody responded. Then my cousin Priyanka commented, "Wait, what?" and the thread unraveled from there. My Aunt Denise, who had already RSVP'd to Claire's now non-existent June wedding, messaged me privately asking if it was true. My mother's own sister called her directly, and from what I heard later, it was not a gentle conversation. 2 of Claire's bridesmaids quietly stepped back from wedding planning duties over the following week. One of them texting me, unprompted, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. That's insane." I didn't gloat. I didn't post again. I let the receipt speak, and I let people draw their own conclusions, the way I should have been allowed to all along. The formal consequences meeting happened 3 weeks later, this time not at the venue but at a mediator's office my father, of all people, insisted on, his one real intervention in the entire ordeal, arranged quietly, almost like an apology he didn't know how to say out loud. We sat around a long table. A woman named Miss Alvarez, a family mediator Daniel and I had agreed to along with my parents, opened the conversation by asking my mother to explain, in her own words, what had happened with the venue. My mother tried the same story, helping overwhelmed daughter, good intentions, but this time, with the venue's documentation already submitted ahead of the meeting, every soft edge of her version had a hard fact sitting next to it. The trip confirmation showing I was in Chicago on May 2nd. The absence of any actual booked venue for Claire before the transfer. The fraud flag from Hollow Oak Manor's own security review. Miss Carter, Ms. Alvarez said gently, your mother sent an email using language designed to appear as though it came from your account. That's not a communication style difference. That's impersonation. My mother started crying. Not the performative crying from the kitchen. Something rawer this time. The crying of someone who has just heard, out loud, in a room with witnesses, what she actually did. I just wanted to keep the peace, she said. I didn't want either of you to be disappointed. You didn't keep the peace, I said quietly. You just decided which one of us was allowed to be disappointed. Claire, to her credit, finally spoke without deflecting. I should have asked you directly. I let Mom handle it because it was easier. That's on me too. My father said almost nothing the entire meeting, but at the end, as we were gathering our things, he looked at me and said, I should have said something sooner. I always figured staying quiet was the safe thing to do. I don't think it was. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard from him in 29 years, and it landed heavier than anything my mother said all day. The wedding date stayed mine. Claire and Tyler eventually booked a different venue, on their own, under their own names, with their own deposit. In the weeks after, the fallout moved through our extended family like weather. My mother's sister stopped hosting the annual 4th of July barbecue at her house, quietly, without explanation, and my mother wasn't invited to help plan the next one, a role she'd occupied, unasked, for a decade. 2 cousins who used to loop my mother into every group decision started looping me in instead, forwarding me things, just so you know what's actually happening, a small telling shift in whose word got trusted by default. Claire had to hire an actual wedding planner for the first time, paying real money for coordination that used to just be me, absorbing tasks without being thanked for it. The specific irony that she now had to pay someone to do what she used to take from me for free. My mother went quiet on social media for a while. When she came back, there were no more soft-focus paragraphs about generosity. 4 months later, Claire called me. Not a text, a call. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she said. Really sorry. Not the group chat kind. I let Mom handle things because it always worked out easier for me, and I never really asked what it cost you. I get it now, a little. Tyler's mom tried something with our registry last month, and I actually said no, out loud, and it felt insane, but I thought about you. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. My mother's growth has been slower and less complete. She still occasionally texts things like, I just think families should share more, as if the last year hadn't happened. 2 months before my wedding, she asked, almost casually, if Claire and Tyler could just borrow some of the floral arrangements after my ceremony for a dinner they were hosting that same weekend. I said no, not angrily, not with a speech, just, no, those are ours. You can ask a florist for your own. She was quiet on the phone for a second, the old script clearly loading behind her silence, and then she said, fine, that's fine, and changed the subject to the weather, which, for her, was as close to acceptance as I was going to get. I didn't feel guilty saying no, that was new. If you've ever been the dependable one, the quiet one, the one who gets told you'll understand right before something of yours disappears, I need you to hear this. Generosity that isn't asked for isn't generosity. It's just theft with better manners. Being needed is not the same as being loved, and being the family member everyone counts on to say yes eventually stops being a compliment and starts being a job nobody's paying you for. You don't have to scream to be taken seriously. You don't have to burn anything down. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop performing calm for people who only respect you when you're upset, and instead, quietly, calmly, start keeping receipts. Boundaries aren't cruelty, documentation isn't drama, and the people who called you difficult for asking questions were usually the same people who didn't want you to know the answers. I still love my family. That's the complicated, unglamorous truth nobody puts in the highlight reel. But I love them now with my eyes open, with a folder of screenshots I hope I never need again, and with a clear sense of what I will and won't hand over, just because someone assumed I would. What would you have done if it were your wedding, your deposit, your name on the fraudulent email? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. This video is completely fictional and created only for entertainment, educational, and reflective purposes.